tooling around town in a Soviet motorcycle, crispy and boozy cannelé, and wine for breakfast. This week, we're in Bordeaux, France.
Traveling the world to bring you delicious dishes, tasty beverages, and interesting experiences. This is the Destination Eat Drink Podcast on the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
I'm Brent Peterson. Welcome to Destination Eat Drink, the travel podcast for foodies. This is the place where we explore the world's great cuisine at destinationeatdrink.com and on the Destination Eat Drink podcast. And this week, we're in Bordeaux with TV host and producer Darley Newman from the PBS show Travels with Darley. But first, let me ask a favor. If you enjoy Destination Eat Drink, give us a 5-star review on your podcast platform. It's easy to do. I'd certainly appreciate it, and thank you so very much. My guest this week is Darley Newman, an award-winning travel journalist. Her show, Travels with Darley, is airing its 10th season on PBS right now. Darley's been on the show before, talking about her adventures from Strasbourg to Brittany and Michigan to Alabama. And this time, we're talking about one of my favorite places in France, Bordeaux. Darley tells me about some great pastry, several great pastries, in fact, and an interactive wine museum, plus visiting some of the best wineries in the world. And then caviar and champagne and a trip to the Bordeaux covered market. Okay, I'm starving, so let's eat.
Destination Eat Drink.
Darley Newman, welcome back to Destination Eat Drink. It's great to have you back on the podcast. Congratulations on the new season of your series, Travels with Darley on PBS. Glad to have you.
Yeah, so great to be with you again. And I love that we're together in always interesting places talking about travel and food. It makes it fun.
So I want to talk about this new season because I've watched, I think, almost all of the shows, and I love the places where you went to, but I got to say, when I saw that Bordeaux was on your list, I was like, oh man, this is one of my favorite places in France. But I feel like Bordeaux sometimes doesn't get the attention that it deserves. So I'm so happy that you're including Bordeaux, because people go to France and they're like, well, we got to go to Paris, and maybe we have to go to the Riviera, and maybe there's a few other places we have to go to. But Bordeaux seems to be further down on the list. Make the case about what makes Bordeaux such a fascinating, interesting, and wonderful place to visit.
I really like traveling to other destinations in France outside of Paris. I've been doing that over the years, and I've actually created, I don't even know how many episodes at this point, but episodes on Brittany, Côte d'Azur, the northeast part of France, the Champagne area, doing history, food, culture, and really trying to capture the essence of some of those smaller places that aren't necessarily on the American traveler's radar. And I think it's a great thing to do because it's like any country or place. Every place is so diverse and they all have their hidden gems. And as you know, Brent, we always try to go out with locals, so we get the insider's take on a place. And Bordeaux is one of those places that, wow, it's just, not only is it beautiful with great wine. So if you like to drink and eat, you're in luck if you're heading to Bordeaux.
You're talking my language, Darley.
I know, but it has a really fascinating history. There are stops that are on, different trails and routes that have been used for centuries. There's, winemaking that goes back to Gallo-Roman times. There's just a lot of wonderful history and places where you can get outside too. I mean, I did a bike tour through vineyards in Bordeaux, and then I also did a retro sidecar tour through the city and walk through the city. And so it was a nice combination of urban and more rural adventures. And again, if you love great museums, you can get that mix in the city and then go out into the countryside and see beautiful chateaus and do your wine tasting. So it's a really wonderful place and also really easy to explore. I mean, I went around Bordeaux, for the actual city of Bordeaux, for a few days. And some days I went totally on my own, just hopping on public transportation. And then I took guided tours as well. And so it really felt like I discovered the city in a way that a lot of different travelers could enjoy it.
I think great points on all of that, Darley. And I'd like to second the motion to take public transport in Bordeaux. They've got an excellent tram system there. We use it all the time when we go to visit Bordeaux. But I wanted to mention one of the ways that you got around, which was so cool, on the motorcycle with the sidecar. I was like, this is the ultimate way to see a city. Describe that a little bit.
Oh my gosh, so much fun. One of the coolest things I did probably in Bordeaux, I went out with it's called the Retro Sidecar Tour, and they actually run them not only in Bordeaux, but also in Paris. And it's a small, a lot of these tours that I take are small businesses. They're just, individual owners, or sometimes they're families. Sometimes it's a group of friends. And this one was, again, small business. Alex was one of the owners that took me out. They take you out in these original Soviet M72 motorcycles with these sidecars that a lot of celebrities seem to have a fascination with. And it's a fun tour because you can get into those side streets and areas that you would be able to walk through, but you may not even find if you're traveling to Bordeaux as a traveler. And there are locals, that know the area really well. You can kind of customize the tour by saying, oh, I'd really like to, like I said, oh, would there be a place where we could grab a glass of wine, later in the day that would be not touristy, a place that the locals go. And Alex took me over to this square. He said that everybody in Bordeaux after work, it was a very popular meeting place, and we had a glass of wine by our sidecar before ending our tour. So it was and it's just a fun way. People are all staring at you because you're in this sidecar. But I really enjoyed it, and I thought it was a fun way to get off the beaten path and see the regular monuments and things that you want to see when you're traveling there, but also get that locals' perspective and into those smaller side streets.
I can't wait for people to see this episode, because you riding around in that sidecar is so cool, because it like you said, it's a Soviet motorcycle, so it has this kind of boxy look to it. And retro is a great name for their business, because it's a very retro looking thing, and it grabs a ton of attention. One of the places that you went in that retro motorcycle sidecar was to the Bordeaux market, which is a beautiful covered market. Talk about your experience there a little bit.
I love going to local markets when I'm traveling, and especially in France, because there's so many different things that you can experience. And of course, there's always wonderful local cheese. I haven't met a market in France where there wasn't some kind of cheese being sold. And cheese is one of my favorite things to try when I'm in France traveling. So it's another wonderful place where you just have the variety of sounds and sights and things to quench your taste buds, but really fun things to discover and purchase. And one of the markets that I visited did have this kind of crazy looking food item called gâteau à la broche, which is, I thought it looked like a large upside down volcanic ice cream cone, perhaps. And they actually would fire this type of dough and turn it into this wild looking pastry. And it's popular in the Pyrenees Mountains, but they were serving it, and I saw it and I thought, wow, I just have to try that because it looks so cool. And I ended up buying one and bringing it back. I did Bordeaux by a river cruise. So I ended up bringing it back to the ship and having it with a bunch of friends that evening too. That's how you make friends, when you bring food items back for people to have while they're watching the sunset, right? So it added to the experience. And again, but I mean, there were oysters, there's local cheeses, and then also really interesting organic products. There are a lot of farms in the Bordeaux area, which is something I didn't really think about before I went there. I knew there was a lot of great wine, but there are a lot of rural farms as well. And at that market, you can try a lot of those products. There were some different sausages that I was able to try, a cheese sausage, of course. And then I was there in the morning, and it was surprising because I think of Germany and I think of people having beer in the morning, but there I am in this cover market, and I sat down and had a glass of wine, and they were serving seafood in the morning. And I thought, well, that's very healthy. So I might as well have some seafood while I'm at this market too. But a fun way to eat your way through a local market and try some different things. And that's located right off of an area that's known as the university area. And so it's kind of a hipper area that students go to, and you can find some more inexpensive food options in general in that area if you're looking to have that locals experience on a budget.
I hadn't heard of the gâteau à la broche until I watched your program, and I looked at this thing. I thought, man, that is right up my alley. But the way you're describing it, like an upside down volcano, is apt. But it's also huge. I mean, I'm glad that you took it back for some friends, because I'm like, how is she going to devour this whole thing? I mean, it is massive, this gâteau à la broche.
It is massive. I mean, I love those I actually really like those big, funny food items now. And at first I thought that's just for, your pictures or social media, but there's usually a backstory to them. And sometimes they're things that people have been making for quite some time. And it's, if you ask about them and hear the history, you'll appreciate them even more. And so I do find it fascinating and think it's a fun thing to explore.
I want to talk about another pastry, because one of my all-time favorite pastries in France is the cannelé, and that's from Bordeaux. And you enjoyed some cannelé. Describe what exactly a cannelé is for folks who aren't familiar with it.
Well, it's a pretty simple. I actually watched a chef create a cannelé. There aren't that many ingredients. It's a pretty simple process, but it is made with a number of egg yolks, and they also put in rum. And it came out of the wine industry. They were using this to like get out the sediment in the wine and doing it with the egg whites. So they had these yolks left over, and they decided, this is the legend that I heard. I mean, I have to, I'd have to like, you hear these like food legend stories.
Right.
I'm sitting under this gate that's dating back to the Middle Ages in the middle of Bordeaux. There's a couple of the old city gates that are still left, just a few. And there is a place where you can get cannelés right beside one of these cool looking gates. And this local guide, Aurélie Chopy, who does food tours of Bordeaux, was guiding me around and telling me this story of the cannelé. And I'm trying these different cannelés because the place that we went had different flavors, and basically the outside gets caramelized, and it's in a specific cylindrical type shape. It almost looks like a small bundt cake to me, if you know what those are. And the outside gets caramelized, so it's crispy, and the inside is often like a little bit, I wouldn't say rubbery, but it's a different sort of a texture, but it's really tasty, and it's not so sweet. It's not the type of pastry that it's super sweet, and it's not, it's just, I feel like it's just the right amount, but there is rum in it, which you can usually taste if you're trying it. And When I watched the chef making it, I was like, when are we adding the rum? But it gets like the sweet crust on the outside, and it is this traditional pastry in Bordeaux. I like to try those local pastries when I'm trying. When I'm traveling. I had a vanilla one with Aurélie, and again, something that came out of has come down through history, came out of the wine industry, which you think about Bordeaux, you think about wine. And this is if you're not a wine drinker and you're traveling to Bordeaux, this is something you definitely have to try, this little type of cake. And it has a interesting history, and it's just a fun, and you'll see them all over Bordeaux. I mean, if you're traveling around and you start to look, you'll see them in a lot of the pastry shops, and there are specific cannelé shops there as well.
I love the cannelé. I love that little crunch you get when you bite into that crispy caramelized exterior, and then you get the flavor of the rum with the cake on the inside. It's so good. But I love the story about the wine industry using the egg whites as a clarifying agent, because you hear that several places. I've been to France, several places when they talk about the pastries, they're like, well, they had all these egg yolks left over. And now that I live in Portugal, I hear a very similar story, because every town in Portugal seems like it has its own pastry, just like in France. And the story that they commonly tell is, Well, they used the egg whites for the monks to starch their collars or the nuns to starch their habits. So they had all these egg yolks left over. And that's how they made, for example, pastel de nata in Lisbon. But there's a million of them all over Portugal. So I love hearing these kind of legends that, from 500, 600 years ago, no one can really verify them, but it makes for a great story, I think.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I like to know the history of different foods and how things came to be. And I think a lot of travelers are diving into that, and people in general, even more now, because food is such an important part of everyone's lives. So when you understand where things came from, why things came to be, it's not only makes for fun conversation when you're out with friends, but it makes you appreciate the food that much more.
I want to talk about one more pastry that you sampled in Bordeaux, Darley, called the Dune Blanche. And I haven't had this before, but it looked really delicious. It looked like kind of a mini cream puff, sort of. How would you describe it?
Oh my gosh, it was amazing. I could have eaten like 10 of them. And I think I did have a number of them. But it looks like, I would say, I mean, it looks like some other pastries you would have had. It's filled with a really light cream that just almost melts in your mouth in a velvety sort of way. And there's a shop in Bordeaux. There's many shops that, again, make these, but then there's one that's famous for it that we were able to stop on our food tour. And it had like a beach theme, and all they served was the Dune Blanche. That's all you could get there. So we walked over to that place, of course, and had these wonderful cream-filled, tasty treats that were just so light and airy. And it was, it's coming from the Dune Blanche has that white cream filling from reminiscent of the beaches. So you can look at it and think, oh, I could see popping one of these into my mouth when I'm on, on the beach in France. But I mean, they had different flavors. They, mango one day, regular cream on another, and they were fantastic. I would definitely recommend, again, seeking these out, trying a cannelé when you're in Bordeaux. So if you're not a wine drinker, there are a lot of things that you can have when you're traveling throughout Bordeaux, not only the cheese, of course, but also these wonderful pastries.
Yeah, I don't want to give people the impression that you were only eating pastry, because you ate caviar too. So you went on a caviar tasting, and caviar, of course, is fish eggs. And I loved watching you do the caviar tasting, because it seems to me, I don't know a lot about caviar, but it seems to me that the French do the caviar tastings better than anyone, because it's so elevated, it's so elegant. And you're tasting this caviar, and I'm just watching it. And between caviar courses, between tasting the different types of caviar, the woman who's leading the tasting is like, okay, now cleanse your palate with champagne.
Yeah.
So, like caviar and champagne. How much more decadent could this get? It just looked absolutely marvelous.
So it was amazing, I have to say. I love traveling in France because the food is so darn good. When I was in Brittany, France, I had some of the best butter I've ever tasted in Saint-Malo. And here in Bordeaux, I was able to try another wonderful butter, because I didn't only get to try caviar, but there was caviar butter. And the woman, Justine, who was helping me learn about caviar, France is one of the largest caviar producers in the world, which, I thought about French caviar, but you don't always, it's not top of mind necessarily. But the Dordogne area is where this particular caviar that I was trying, it was Caviar du Nouvic, is the shop, and it's right in the heart of Bordeaux. So again, accessible to travelers. I liked it because it's sustainable and ethically farmed. But also it was really tasty, and I'm not a big caviar eater, Brent, either. I mean, I don't get it all the time. But it was so funny because I got there and she's telling me, oh, you can choose from champagne or vodka to cleanse your palate between your caviar tastings. And I did try both, but I started with the champagne. That French champagne is good. But I brought some back to the US. It was really tasty. There's only a certain amount. You have to bring only a small amount back if you're actually bringing it back. There are regulations on that, which I had to Google and look up when I was there. But salty, again, melts in your mouth in a certain way. But it was a fun little excursion and stop. And they have a cafe there too. So you can actually just order stuff off a menu and try caviar without buying, a jar or something like that of it. And a fun way to dive into one of these specialty products that comes out of France.
You think of caviar in France, but also I guess Russia is a big producer of caviar. So I guess it makes sense to have vodka with your caviar too, if you've got that Russia connection. I didn't think of that before, but yeah, that makes total sense.
I know. Why not, right?
Yeah. Let's talk about a place in Bordeaux that is actually one of my favorite spots in all of France, which is the Cité du Vin, which is the Wine Museum and Education Center. Just to call it a museum, I think, gives it the short shift. It is an amazing museum, but they also do a lot of educational work there. Describe this place because, like I said, it is one of my favorite places to go in France.
I thought it was really unique. Again, it's a multi-level museum. The architecture is pretty phenomenal. It was designed to look like wine swirling in a glass, the actual building. And it's this round shape so that when you're traveling through it, you're supposed to almost be traveling through a wine glass, which when you think about it it's a pretty cool architectural statement. And
Absolutely.
it is a wine museum. So it's nice. And you can get up high within the museum to do actual wine tasting on the top level. And I don't know if you did that, Brent, but I thought it was cool.
Yes.
Yeah, they did have wines from all over the world and they changed them and they had some more rare stuff. And I specifically asked, let me try something that I wouldn't be trying every day while I'm here because it's fun to try something kind of off the wall. And I had a Peruvian wine as one of the things that I tried when I was there, one of the types of wines. But I was led through the museum by someone that worked there, and she was sharing with me that you really are charting the history of winemaking throughout the world, not just France. When you're there, it's one of those museums that's really modern in the way that their exhibitions are very interactive, which I love. I mean,
Yes.
I traveled to a lot of museums, and my favorite museums are the interactive ones. In Belgium, I went to a museum of sound where you can play instruments. I love City Museum in St. Louis because you can climb on things. It's all huge found objects, everything from like school buses to slides. It's crazy. And this is another museum where you're going through this history of winemaking and you're able to smell different scents. There's tactile things to touch. There's fun pop cultural references. I thought it was funny that they had an exhibit that was showing how the astronauts drank wine in space and how there was a friend's wine at one point. I never saw that, but I think I was too young to be drinking wine at that point. So whatever, maybe I just didn't know about it. But yeah, so really fun history of wine, and it makes you again appreciate wine that much more. And I think that if you're going to visit, you could visit at any point in your journey through Bordeaux, but it might be a good idea to go there at the beginning of your trip to really get that context of where you're going and the further insight into wine before you go out into the more of the countryside, into the wineries and vineyards to do your tasting. So another awesome stop, cool museum if you like going to museums, very accessible and just beautiful to look at as well as travel through. I don't know. What did you think of it?
I loved it. It's one of my favorite spots, like I said. And what I really liked about it was you mentioned all the interactive stuff. And I think one of the things that sometimes puts people off of wine is that they think it's too stuffy or too unapproachable. And what the Cité du Vin does is really brings it down to the level where you can get involved with it, whether it's doing the different smelling exhibits or learning about having those exhibits of the wines from wine regions from all over the world. And I don't know if you went into the one room that I just loved. It was kind of a reproduction of a dinner party, and they had holograms of people all around the table, and you could walk from person to person and kind of eavesdrop in on their conversation about wine or politics or whatever. It was fascinating, but it was also fun and educational at the same time. And that's what really brought it home for me as a great place to visit.
Fantastic in the way that they did it, and so modern and so interesting. And again, I like those museums that are updated. And some museums I'm going into now, I'm like, oh my gosh, they have to do an update, or they've got to get some of these more interactive exhibitions, because that's what people are looking for now. And it makes it really fun for all ages as well, that you can really make it an experiential visit.
Like you said, Darley, I think this would be good advice to go to this museum first to kind of get grounded on, wine around the world, but specifically wine from Bordeaux before you go out and visit some of the chateaus and some of the vineyards and whatnot. And you did this. You went to Saint-Emilion, which is where some of the most famous vineyards are that produce Bordeaux wine. Talk about going to Saint-Emilion and visiting the wineries and drinking good wine.
Well, there's so many different wineries and vineyards you can visit if you're in Saint-Emilion. They were telling me at this Beau Séjour Bicot, and I'm not pronouncing that totally right, but it was a really historic winery that I was able to visit. And they have it's a first classified growth type wine. And it's all about, there's all these classifications of wine when you're traveling in Bordeaux. And they're, some of them are getting these like specialized seals or symbols. The soil in Saint-Emilion is known to be so great because it's this limestone clay soil. And that particular winery is just outside of Saint-Emilion. I mean, you could walk from the winery into Saint-Emilion. And again, a wonderful wine. I actually have some waiting for me right now in New Jersey, because we all went in together, my crew and I, and we bought a case together. Like, we split it up and shipped it to my photographer's house. So it has now arrived.
Oh, perfect.
I know Greg was talking to me yesterday, and he said he'll be in the city this week so I can get my wine. And I thought, oh, I need it because the holidays are coming. Like, I need that amazing French wine. But this particular winery is another wonderful family-owned place. And Saint-Emilion is interesting because there's a whole history with Emilion the monk, who was hiding out there, living in a grotto, kind of a hermit, but performing these miracles. And he became known in the area and was a draw for people to come and visit Saint-Emilion. And the village or town itself is just another wonderful, beautiful place to go, with multiple levels within the city of places to walk around and explore medieval architecture, and stop and have a glass of some type of wine at a cafe. But the history there was really interesting, and they had these classic vintages. The wine was silky and smooth. And I love when you're tasting wine in Bordeaux, because if you talk to some of the different winemakers and the sommeliers, if they're describing the wine, I always ask them to describe the wine. They'll ask me and I'll give my little description, but then I love to hear what they have to say, because when they start to describe the wines for you and how the grapes have been aged and what they're tasting, because everyone tastes something different, it's almost like poetry. I mean, and some of the descriptions, I was surprised. I mean, some of the ways they're describing the wine, I was like, wow, this is like not what I would think about when I thought about wine. And that's why Cité du Vin is so interesting as well, because they're taking you through this history of winemaking, but also when you're able to smell some of the different things that you could smell within a wine, I was surprised at things I hadn't thought about. But then when I did smell them, like an old leather book or an old leather shoe even, which doesn't sound appealing, but you smell those things, and then you go and taste the wine and you say, oh, now I see that within the wine. So it really does expand your mind if you're into wine and wine tasting to travel through this area. But this winery was another one that had this wonderful, wonderful wine, and was really a great story as well.
I think maybe we should take this juncture to point out that we're talking about, really some of the best wine in the world, and people might think, well, it's completely out of my range, it's out of my budget, I'll never be able to afford that. And yes, there are bottles that will cost hundreds and hundreds of dollars. But that said, when you're in Bordeaux, you can, because people are living on everyday budgets and they drink wine with, like you said, for breakfast sometimes. There are affordable ways to drink really, really good wine when you're in Bordeaux. Just ask folks, what's a good everyday wine here from Bordeaux? What do you recommend? What's on the menu that you like to drink every day? And you can stay within your budget.
Oh, no, for sure. There were really inexpensive wines in different places, and it's very regionalized and very specific to the location. Usually in every location that you're traveling, there's a wine from that specific area. I was in this old fort city and trying a wine from like right there in the area. So you can get hyper local with it, and you don't have to spend a lot. If you've been to Italy, it's like Italy in that way, where you can get really inexpensive. They say the wine is less expensive than buying a bottle of water. So you might as well opt for the wine.
That's right. So that choice is easy. Before we leave Bordeaux, or at least the region around Bordeaux, you went to Cognac, which is a town. I didn't realize how close it is to Bordeaux because I'd never been to Cognac. Cognac is where they make the liqueur that's twice distilled, aged in oak barrels. Tell me about your experience visiting Cognac, because I've never been.
I thought that was interesting as well. I think it was just an hour and a half from one of the locations where I was in Bordeaux. So we did go inland a bit, but it wasn't far at all. It was definitely feasible for even a part of a day trip. I went to Remy Martin. They're one of the big four producers of cognac. And obviously cognac is a lot like those DOC brands and those specific labelings where, as you said, Brent, it needs to be aged in an oak barrel. That's part of the process. And I just didn't know this, that cognac starts out as wine and eventually it's aged and it becomes cognac. So that was something that was new to me. And Remy Martin's one of the brands that's been around since the 1700s. There's 5 generations of a family that have been making this specific cognac. And I thought it was funny because Damien, who was the guide that I had, first of all, he was much like this woman. I was in Champagne, in the Champagne region and place in France. And I was able to go to Taittinger, which is one of the big champagne producing houses. And I was able to have champagne tasting with one of the family members, Vitale Taittinger. So she's part of the Taittinger family. And I felt like I was with champagne royalty, but we're tasting champagne. And she's telling me that she had just come from a lunch where she was having champagne, and you can have champagne for breakfast and lunch and dinner. And I was like, wow, she's so good at selling this champagne. And it was the same with Damien at Remy Martin, because he's telling me, you can have cognac all day long.
as long as you don't want to be productive, you can have it all day long.
I was like, can you really? But so we went and toured an area of Remy Martin where, again, it's a little mini museum. They show you the oak barrels. They show you the process of making cognac. And then you can go into a tasting room and they have different cognacs that you can try straight up, or are they making to cocktails? And I did both. It was the regular straight up cognac, a lot of alcohol in there, very strong, but also smooth and really, really good and something different. And now that I've been back in the States, I'm noticing more and more people drinking cognac and having cognac cocktails. So I don't know if it's having a mini resurgence or it could be that I'm just noticing it more. But I think he told me it was around 40. One of the types that I tried was around 40% alcohol, but that different cognacs are aged. It could be anywhere from it could be up to 100 years or sometimes 40 years that it's aged. So you can get these really, long aged cognac drinks. And I said, oh, so I could buy a cognac or order an oak barrel for like a friend or family member who has a young child. And then when they're, in their 40s, like doing whatever, they could be having their cognac for the first time that's been aging their lifetime. So it's kind of funny to think about it in that way. But I thought it was another interesting aspect of traveling to that part of France and learning about another type of product that comes out of France that has quite a history as well.
It's a good idea, Darley. I was talking with Tony Mazziagli from Florence, and she spends a lot of time up in Modena in Italy, and she was telling me about making the vinegars, and she said basically the same thing, the same idea that you had, which is when the child is born, they set aside a little barrel from that year for the child, and it may pay for their education, or it may, in the old days, it might have been a dowry for someone, because once it's aged, 20 years or something, it becomes extraordinarily valuable, and they can, make some dough off of it if it sits in the attic for long enough.
I think it's so fun. I love the idea. And I mean, I will drink this wine I ordered from Bordeaux when it comes probably, but I did think about saving. We didn't buy a super expensive batch or bottles. As you said, Brent, you can get a lot of things that are really great for affordable prices. And actually the shipping, I don't think was bad either. And then if you buy enough of anything, sometimes they'll throw in the shipping, like me buying my Turkish carpet from Cappadocia. We bought it. We went in as a group, and we had a number of carpets that we bought. And when they got shipped to the US, our shipping was free. So
bonus. Yeah,
bonus.
Well, it's been great talking to you about Bordeaux. I want to talk about a bunch of Bordeaux. I kind of have a soft spot for Bordeaux, so I tend to go on and on about Bordeaux. But I want to talk to you about a bunch of the other places that you visited on this latest season of Travels with Darley. Would you do another episode for us and come back next week and talk about those places?
I would love to. Gosh, Santa Fe, Turkey, Delaware, surprisingly, a lot of cool food finds in Delaware. And I know I didn't even mention the burrata Pop-Tarts. So anyway, we'll have to talk again.
Okay, there you go. I'm so happy I got to talk to Darley about a place that I really adore, Bordeaux. I know it might be crazy to say Bordeaux's an underrated place. I mean, everybody knows about the great wines of Bordeaux, but as far as the city itself goes, it's all the great food you get in addition to the wine. It's really quite special. Don't blow off Bordeaux in favor of trekking straight out to wine country. Trust me, you'll love Bordeaux. I was telling Darley off the air about the first time Karen and I went to Bordeaux. In fact, we were severely jet lagged and dragging ass, and we stopped by this little wine bar called Vin Urbains and just had a lovely time that perked us right up. We had some great wine, of course, but also some little toasts with truffle pâté. The place wasn't fancy or anything, but that's Bordeaux. It seems everyone is really invested in making the food culture special. Anyway, that's it for this week. If you want to read my full foodie travel guide to Bordeaux, you can get that at destinationeatdrink.com. And Darley will be back next week to talk about more of season 10 of her show and some of the places she liked, like Santa Fe, Turkey, and much more. And if you want more info about Travels with Darley or the places we talked about in this episode, get that in the show notes at radiomisfits.com/DED214. And be sure to watch Travels with Darley on PBS. Check your local listings. The new season is out now. And if you enjoy Destination Eat Drink, please consider dropping us a couple bucks to help us fund the project. It's easy to do. Just go to destinationeatdrink.com and click on the contribute button. And thank you very much. And while you're there, check out the story I just posted about a Spanish tomato soup, but it's not gazpacho. It's called salmorejo, and it's delicious. That's at destinationeatdrink.com/salmorejo. That's SALMOREJO, or just go to destinationeatdrink.com/blog. Destination Eat Drink is distributed by the Radio Misfits Podcast Network and a guy who's definitely on board with the Cognac for Breakfast program, Ed Silla. Thanks, Ed. I'm Brent Peterson. I'll see you down the road.
Join us next week for another culinary adventure on Destination Eat Drink, a presentation of the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.